Welcome to this very interesting, educative, and entertaining episode of an old historical Boston city in Massachusetts, United States. Officially, the city of Boston is the capital and most populous city in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and is the cultural and financial center of New England in the Northeastern United States, with an area of 48.4 square miles, 125 square kilometers, 9, and a population of 675,647 in 2020. The Greater Boston Metropolitan Statistical Area is the 11th largest in the country. Please subscribe to this channel and give this video a thumbs up. Boston is one of the United States' oldest municipalities. It was founded on the Willamette Peninsula in 1630 by Puritan settlers from Boston, Lincolnshire. During the American Revolution, Boston was the location of several key events, including the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, the hanging of Paul Revere's lantern signal in Old North Church, the Battle of Bunker Hill, and the Siege of Boston. Following American independence from Great Britain, the city continued to play an important role as a port, manufacturing hub, and center for education and culture. The city has expanded beyond the original peninsula through land reclamation and municipal annexation. It now attracts many tourists, with Faneuil Hall alone drawing more than 20 million visitors per year. Boston's many firsts include the United States' first public park, Boston Common, 1634, the first public school, Boston Latin School, 1635, the first subway system, Tremont Street Subway, 1897, and the first large public library, Boston Public Library, 1848. In the 21st century, Boston emerged as a global leader in higher education and academic research. Greater Boston's many colleges and universities include Harvard University and MIT, both located in neighboring Cambridge and both routinely included among the world's most highly ranked universities. The city is also a national leader in scientific research, law, medicine, engineering, and business. With nearly 5,000 startup companies, the city is considered a global pioneer in innovation and entrepreneurship, and more recently in artificial intelligence. Boston's economic base also includes finance, professional and business services, biotechnology, information technology, and government activities. Households in the city claim the highest average rate of philanthropy in the United States. Boston businesses and institutions rank among the top in the country for environmental sustainability and new investment. Prior to European colonization, the region around modern-day Boston was inhabited by the indigenous Massachusetts. Their habitation consisted of small, seasonal communities. The people who lived in the area most likely moved between inland winter homes along the Charles River, called Quinobaquin, meaning meandering, by the native people, and summer communities on the coast. Game was more easily hunted inland during bear tree seasons, and fishing shoals and shellfish beds were most easily exploited during the summer months. Being surrounded by foul-smelling mudflats during the temperate part of the year, the Willamette Peninsula itself was more sparsely occupied than its surroundings before the arrival of Europeans. Nevertheless, archaeological excavations have revealed one of the oldest fish weirs in New England on Boylston Street. Native people constructed this weir to trap fish as early as 7,000 years before European arrival in the Western Hemisphere. The first European to live in what would become Boston was a Cambridge-educated Anglican cleric named William Blackstone. He was the person most directly responsible for the foundation of Boston by Puritan colonists in 1630. This occurred after Blackstone invited one of their leaders, Isaac Johnson to cross Back Bay from the failing colony of Charlestown and share the peninsula. This the Puritans did in September 1630. Before dying on September 30, 1630, one of Johnson's last official acts as the leader of the Charlestown community was to name their new settlement across the river Boston. He named the settlement after his hometown in Lincolnshire, the place from which he, his wife, namesake of the Arbella, and John Cotton, grandfather of Cotton Mather, had emigrated to New England. The name of the English town ultimately derives from its patron saint, Saint Botolph, in whose church John Cotton served as the rector until his emigration with Johnson. In early sources, the Lincolnshire Boston was known as St. Botolph's Town, later contracted to Boston. Before this, renaming the settlement on the peninsula had been known as Shawmut by Blackston and Tri-Mountain by the Puritan settlers he had invited. The Puritan influence on Boston began even before its foundation, with the 1629 Cambridge Agreement. This document created the Massachusetts Bay Colony and was signed by its first governor, John Winthrop. Puritan ethics and their focus on education influenced the early history of the city. America's first public school, Boston Latin School, was founded in Boston in 1635. Boston was the largest town in the 13 colonies until Philadelphia outgrew it in the mid-18th century. Boston's oceanfront location made it a lively port, and the city primarily engaged in shipping and fishing during its colonial days. Boston was a primary stop on a Caribbean trade route and imported large amounts of molasses, which led to the creation of Boston baked beans. Boston's economy stagnated in the decades prior to the Revolution. By the mid-18th century, New York City and Philadelphia surpassed Boston in wealth. During this period, Boston encountered financial difficulties even as other cities in New England grew rapidly. Many crucial events of the American Revolution occurred in or near Boston. The city's mob presence, along with the colonists' growing lack of faith in either Britain or its parliament, fostered a revolutionary spirit in the city. When the British Parliament passed the Stamp Act in 1765, a Boston mob ravaged the homes of Andrew Oliver, the official tasked with enforcing the act, and Thomas Hutchinson, then the lieutenant governor of Massachusetts. The British sent 2 regiments to Boston in 1768 in an attempt to quell the angry colonists. This did not sit well with the colonists. In 1770, during the Boston Massacre, British troops shot into a crowd that had started to violently harass them. The colonists compelled the British to withdraw their troops. The event was widely publicized and fueled a revolutionary movement in America. In 1773, Parliament passed the Tea Act. Many of the colonists saw the act as an attempt to force them to accept the taxes established by the Townshend Acts. The act prompted the Boston Tea Party, where a group of angered Bostonian citizens threw an entire shipment of tea sent by the East India Company into Boston Harbor. The Boston Tea Party was a key event leading up to the Revolution, as the British government responded furiously with the coercive acts, demanding compensation for the destroyed tea from the Bostonians. This angered the colonists further and led to the American Revolutionary War. The war began in the area surrounding Boston with the battles of Lexington and Concord. Boston itself was besieged for almost a year during the Siege of Boston, which began on April 19, 1775. The New England militia impeded the movement of the British Army. Sir William Howe, then the commander-in-chief of the British forces in North America, led the British Army in the siege. On June 17, the British captured the Charlestown Peninsula in Boston during the Battle of Bunker Hill. The British Army outnumbered the militia stationed there, but it was a Pyrrhic victory for the British because their army suffered irreplaceable casualties. It was also a testament to the skill and training of the militia, as their stubborn defense made it difficult for the British to capture Charlestown without suffering further irreplaceable casualties. Several weeks later, George Washington took over the militia after the Continental Congress established the Continental Army to unify the revolutionary effort. Both sides faced difficulties and supply shortages in the siege, and the fighting was limited to small-scale raids and skirmishes. The narrow Boston Neck, which at that time was only about 100 feet wide, impeded Washington's ability to invade Boston, and a long stalemate ensued. A young officer, Rufus Putnam, came up with a plan to make portable fortifications out of wood that could be erected on the frozen ground under cover of darkness. Putnam supervised this effort, which successfully installed both the fortifications and dozens of cannon on Dorchester Heights that Henry Knox had laboriously brought through the snow from Fort Ticonderoga. The astonished British awoke the next morning to see a large array of cannons bearing down on them. General Howe is believed to have said that the Americans had done more in one night than his army could have done in 6 months. The British Army attempted a cannon barrage for 2 hours, but their shot could not reach the colonists' cannons at such a height. The British gave up, boarded their ships and sailed away. Boston still celebrates Evacuation Day each year. Washington was so impressed, he made Rufus Putnam his chief engineer. After the Revolution, Boston's long seafaring tradition helped make it one of the nation's busiest ports for both domestic and international trade. Boston's harbor activity was significantly curtailed by the Embargo Act of 1807, adopted during the Napoleonic Wars, and the War of 1812. Foreign trade returned after these hostilities, but Boston's merchants had found alternatives for their capital investments in the interim. Manufacturing became an important component of the city's economy, and the city's industrial manufacturing overtook international trade in economic importance by the mid-19th century. A network of small rivers bordering the city and connecting it to the surrounding region facilitated shipment of goods and led to a proliferation of mills and factories. Later, a dense network of railroads furthered the region's industry and commerce. During this period, Boston flourished culturally, as well, admired for its rarefied literary life and generous artistic patronage, with members of old Boston families, eventually dubbed Boston Brahmins, coming to be regarded as the nation's social and cultural elites. They are often associated with the American upper class, Harvard University, and the Episcopal Church. Boston was an early port of the Atlantic triangular slave trade in the New England colonies, but was soon overtaken by Salem, Massachusetts and Newport, Rhode Island. Boston eventually became a center of the abolitionist movement. The city reacted strongly to the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, contributing to President Franklin Pierce's attempt to make an example of Boston after the Anthony Burns fugitive slave case. In 1822, the citizens of Boston voted to change the official name from the Town of Boston to the City of Boston, and on March 19, 1822, the people of Boston accepted the charter incorporating the city. At the time Boston was chartered as a city, the population was about 46,226, while the area of the city was only 4.8 square miles, 12 square kilometers. In the 1820s, Boston's population grew rapidly, and the city's ethnic composition changed dramatically with the first wave of European immigrants. Irish immigrants dominated the first wave of newcomers during this period, especially following the Great Famine, By 1850, about 35,000 Irish lived in Boston. In the latter half of the 19th century, the city saw increasing numbers of Irish, Germans, Lebanese, Syrians, French Canadians, and Russian and Polish Jews settling in the city. By the end of the 19th century, Boston's core neighborhoods had become enclaves of ethnically distinct immigrants, with their residents yielding lasting cultural change. Italians became the largest inhabitants of the North End, Irish dominated South Boston and Charlestown, and Russian Jews lived in the West End. Irish and Italian immigrants brought with them Roman Catholicism. Currently, Catholics make up Boston's largest religious community, and the Irish have played a major role in Boston politics since the early 20th century. Prominent figures include the Kennedys, Tip O'Neill, and John F. Fitzgerald. Please subscribe to this channel so you get notified each time we upload a new video. And thank you for watching this video. We the Comely Travel team appreciate your attention. Tell us what you think about this video in the comments section. Have a nice day ahead.